Awesome. I think I'm live. Guess we'll find out. I'm going to kind of be working my way around this whole new explosion into the cyber world. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not that old. But I am so excited to be here doing a live presentation tonight. Giving this a go. I don't have any streaming software, so normally I would share some kind of presentation, but that's not going to be the case tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about Holistic Magick, what it means, what it is, and also take a kind of a dive into the pentagram and ways that you can work with the pentagram in a more holistic fashion. So if you're here joining me, please feel free to comment. Please feel free to ask questions. If something sparks a question during the course of this session, and I will answer it hopefully as soon as I can. Like I said, this is still all new to me. I usually do Zoom presentations, but I really wanted to give it a go with going live. And so that's why I'm here tonight. And if you're here, I really appreciate it. So let me just start by talking a little bit about the Temple of Ma'at. The Temple of Ma'at Knoxville was founded in 2000, and we have online presence on Instagram, on TikTok. I just added Tumblr, and of course I am RoseCrow on Blue Sky. That is my magical name that I've had for a very long time. So you can find me on Blue Sky as RoseCrow. And I would appreciate, of course, if you are so inclined that you subscribe to this channel. There is already some content on this channel. Some is kind of tarot affirmations, that kind of thing. But other videos are actual instructions from sigil magic to sacred alphabets to making your own black salt, that kind of thing. So with that being said, let me go ahead and dive in. Again, I'm RoseCrow. I run the Temple of Ma'at Knoxville. I founded it in 2000, and it was inspired by many conversations that I had with my teacher, who I was very fortunate to find. If you find a good teacher, you are so blessed. And I had an amazing, wonderful teacher. And I started my path with him somewhere around 87, 88. And it included both ceremonial magic and witchcraft. And starting out probably the first 10 to 15 years, I was heavily focused on ceremonial magic. I am a former member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, one official temple and one renegade temple, but that's a story for another day. So I've been practicing both for a very long time. And we had many conversations initially about the inner order of these Rosicrucian temples, being Christian, Rosicrucian. And we kind of bantered ideas back and forth about having an inner order that was pagan or just not Christian, that focused more on the mythic deities, focused more on the Egyptian for me, because I've been a Kemetic witch from day one. I had an experience with Isis when I was about 4 years old, and I know that sounds crazy, but it was an amazing experience, so it led me to a Kemetic path. So when I founded the Temple of Ma'at Knoxville, I dedicated it to several principles, but one of them was Holistic Magick. And I'm going to get to that in just a second as far as some basic tenets that we're going to run over, so you have a basic idea of the principles and philosophies that we work with in the Temple of Ma'at and in the Coven Priesthood of the Sacred Earth. So initially, this path for me, and it's kind of been a lifelong path for justice for the feminine divine, the divine feminine, I asked my mom very early on where the goddess was, because inherently I knew that there was an imbalance there with not having a female face of God. And so it started a long journey that I'm still on. But when I first started the Temple of Ma'at Knoxville as a holistic temple, the big focus was actually on just restoring the goddess. I had studied Hermetic ritual intensely and found that some of it still held a strong patriarchal bias. And so a part of me then was already deconstructing those rituals. You can call it heresy if you want to, But deconstructing those rituals to balance out the feminine, to make it more symmetrical, to make it more organic, to make it more a mirror of our life as humans. And I am going to share one book because I want to give credit where credit is due. And this book set me on a path to finding just what it meant to practice holistic magic. Now, this book is called The Other God. It's by Yuri Stoyanov, and it's by Yale University Press. I love this book, but let me tell you, it took me 2 years to read this book because it would send me down so many rabbit holes. And what it does is it covers Gnostic dualism from Zoroastrianism, which is one of the oldest religions, recognized religions, all the way to the Cathar heresy that sparked the Inquisition. And it was such a deep dive into just what Gnostic duality was that it made me realize what I was missing, and that was a holistic path. If you're familiar with any of the Hermetic paths, and even witchcraft practices have some are influenced by Kabbalah and the ceremonial magic, at least as far as British traditional witchcraft, which started with Gardner because he was influenced by these Hermeticists as well. But inherently, it is a Gnostic dualist system. And what I mean when I say that is that the above is sacred and the below is profane. And in a holistic magic practice, that is not the case. So let's just go ahead and dive in. I hope you can see this. Like I said, I didn't have a presentation, so you're going to have to deal with my rather obvious inability to draw. But and I hope you can see some of these. But I'm just going to touch on these briefly because I do want to dig into pentagram magic, and especially for those of you that do ritual magic, this will have some meaning for you. But even if you're a witch and you work with the elementals, this class or this session, I hope you will garner some inspiration from it for how you do your own practice, especially daily practice. So let's just touch really briefly on the principles of holistic magic. The obvious one is unity behind duality. Every duality, every polarity, whether it's complementary or in opposition, has a unity behind it, has something behind it that is the whole from which it has been, which it has departed into a binary. So there's always the goal and the focus on finding the unity behind duality. And so for a real simple example, like love and hate. At the core, love and hate are both feelings, are both emotions. So we can get stuck on that polarity, which is kind of the straight line. But life is a circle. So when you get stuck on just that polarity, the 2 points at the end of that line, you miss the spectrum that is life. So that's a lot about also what I mean about the unity behind duality. Life is a spectrum. So when you get too rigid and you get locked into poles, to male and female, dark and light, good and evil, it can become very rigid and very inflexible, and it can also impact you in ways that aren't natural because life is much more complicated and much more whole than that. So part of taking out that dualism was understanding that there's always a unity behind it. We could look at it from the point of phenomenology, where you can experience the absolute depths of sorrow. But when you experience those depths of sorrow, you open the door to an ecstatic amount of joy because one does not exist without the other. One is defined by the other. So that's just something to keep in mind. And of course, like I said, what got me started was, where's the goddess? Where's the goddess? I noticed that in a lot of the Hermetic ritual, there was a patriarchal bias to the masculine over the feminine. And whether that was just manifested as fire over water, or how you performed a particular ritual, or how they even looked at the right-hand path and the left-hand path. And we'll touch on that when we talk about good and evil. But so for me, it started out, I need the goddess to be more present in my life. I need the system that I'm working with to be more balanced, feminine and masculine, God and goddess. Now, at this point in my life, I'm an animist. I'm not a deist. But those terms still have meaning, whether that's just on a psychological level or some other level, but they do have meaning. So what I found, and what I found with this process was it really made me reevaluate what is good and what is evil. Because in the Gnostic paradigm, above is sacred and below is profane. Above is good, below is evil. Heaven is, good, and earth is evil. And while I recognize wholeheartedly that more modern hermeticists and alchemists and ceremonial magicians are correcting that in their own practice, which I think is a very beautiful thing, it still is part of the foundation of the hermetic system. So I really got on this path of this next line, deconstruction. It made me really evaluate everything, like break it down in its parts and put them back together, but remove the unhealthy parts. So it was a deconstruction and then a reconstruction of personal philosophies that I had, the way I approached my personal connection to the divine, the way I embodied goddess, or the way I embodied God. So that's still a big part of the process. If you get into any kind of path of holistic magic, you're going to start deconstructing things because the idea of good and evil, especially if you take a closer look at it, there's a better way to define that. And from holistic magic and the way that we practice it in the temple, it's more about, is it natural? Is it life affirming? Or is it unnatural and not life affirming? Because we know even destruction is life affirming in the cycle of life. So that type of thing is really key to a holistic magic path. And then integration. So integration is a very key word. Integration is a word I have been using since the foundation of the temple versus the word mastery. Because as you know, when you work in any kind of system, and it can be whether you're starting in a coven or whether you're starting in a ceremonial magic temple, it starts with how you work with the elementals, because that is our foundation. We are made of earth, air, water, and fire. But I don't like the word mastery. Now, I think mastery is an okay word in specific situations or specific scenarios. But when it comes to working with elemental natures, we prefer the word integration. So the idea, for instance, we're going to talk about this when we start talking about the pentagram. When we do our ritual of the pentacle, and I can do it daily, and that's part of what we're going to explore here. We don't banish. You can banish malignant energies and malefic intent and that kind of thing, but to think that you can banish nature, that you can banish earth, air, water, and fire either within or without you never made sense to me. And on a holistic path, the idea is so much more about integration of these elemental energies, because the idea is you want kind of a symmetry of all these elemental natures within you and in the world around you. And we're going to dig into that in just a minute. The biggest concept to enforce or reinforce with holistic magic is that the earth is also sacred. There is no profane. What is profane are those things that aren't life affirming, are those things that are malefic, are those things that intentionally harm or intentionally cause suffering. So the earth is sacred. So, the air you breathe is sacred. The people that you come in contact with, those connections are sacred. It's all a matter of awareness and nurturing and personal work. A lot of it's personal work. And then finally, and I'm going to talk a little bit about this because I'm going to talk a little bit about how the temple is structured as far as, I hate to use the word grades. Again, I don't like hierarchical structures because it is kind of antithetical to holistic magic. But there's always a macro cosmic relationship going on in the universe. For instance, we are individuals. We are humans in a specific incarnation, and we are surrounded by humans. So we're part of a collective. So we are the micro that is the macro. That collective, that, whether it's your family or your tribe, that human collective is part of a larger collective of just all of humanity. And just like our individual consciousness is a microcosm of the collective consciousness, and the human consciousness is a microcosm of the planetary consciousness. So that's kind of how it's a kind of a very druidic way to look at things. And I have to say I've been heavily influenced by the druidic path because I really liked the way they approached the elementals by grades. Now, if you're familiar with ceremonial magic, you start out in the earth grade as a neophyte, and then you have an air grade, a water grade, a fire grade. And I could tell you some horror stories about that, but we'll save that for another day as well. But as far as that macro microcosm goes, when you come into the Temple of Ma'at, or when I take you on as a personal student, you start in the earth grade, but we'll call it more the earth plane, the earth consciousness, working with the earth consciousness. And the symbol that becomes sacred at that point that you begin working with is the pentagram. And I've got, a cute little picture I've drawn right here, the pentagram. So the upright pentagram. So in our earth grade, we are centered on earth. And so this penultimate point at the top here represents the sun or the cosmic consciousness. So when you're working in the earth grade, you're getting all of those elemental natures balanced and symmetrical and healthy as a single organism to create the vessel to allow for you to embody the cosmic consciousness. So for instance, I have one of my sister witches who has now been initiated as a sun priest in the priesthood of the sacred earth, which is the coven. And their work now is more going to be with their sacred symbol is the hexagram. They are the sun in the center of the symbol. So if you're familiar with the hexagram, well, it's surrounded by the ancients, the planetary energies. And those planetary energies, as you're probably very well aware, either from astrology or psychology, represent mythic forces, so more psychic forces. So the idea in the earth grade is getting your elemental natures balanced and harmonious. You're not ever going to be 100% perfect. We're humans. But becoming a strong vessel for that cosmic consciousness where you can really start working with psychic forces. That's where shadow work really comes into play. Understanding your own psyche is a big part of that grade. So in the earth grade, we work with the pentagram. And so traditionally, you've probably seen several versions of the pentagram as far as elemental associations on the pentagram. We've switched it up just a little bit. If there's one thing I can impart to you as somebody that's been on this path for 30 some years, if something doesn't resonate with you, go ahead and change it. For the longest time, I used the traditional elemental associations on the pentagram that I had been taught. And it just never really worked right for me. And as this system of holistic magic has developed in the temple, I made a few changes. I'm just going to share them with you. But however you want to do those elemental associations, it's completely up to you, because at the end of the day, we're going to just talk about those 4 independent energies and ways to make them cohesive and integrated. But for us, like I said, with the earth grade, we have the sun at the top, but that's any liminal, numinous, sacred, higher aspect that you are seeking to achieve in the grade. So we put fire over here. Traditionally, fire is down here, but we've got air, and I know you can barely see that triangle, but that's the air and fire, because I really liked the reciprocity of having the fire and the water on the same line. That kind of fits into our whole understanding of the polarity of feminine and masculine. That nomenclature is nomenclature that I know gets just burned into the psyche, so to speak. But we need to start moving away from it, because it can be very limiting, and it can make it difficult to be inclusive. So a lot of time, for instance, when we're talking about the male and female, we will say things like the active for the male and the receptive for the feminine, or essence for the masculine and presence for the feminine. There's all kinds of nomenclature, and I'm probably going to do a class on that at some point, on just nomenclature that we can change to become a more inclusive spiritual group. And same for you, whatever group that you're using. We don't have to stick to such a rigid male-female type polarity, because as we know, and as we discussed earlier, we can get stuck on those polarities and forget that there's a spectrum, that life is a circle, and that there's a spectrum there. So we make that switch in the Temple of Ma'at. And like I said, I'm going to reiterate again, we don't vanish, because we really want to learn to integrate and to work harmoniously with all our elemental natures in a way that leads to a spiritual whole. So let's kind of, and I know some of y'all are going to be familiar with this, because if you're in any kind of magical practice, you have probably become very well acquainted with earth, air, water, and fire. So for our purposes for discussing pentagram magic, we're going to keep it pretty simple. I'm going to just use 2 basic terms, one kind of personal and one a little bit more collective. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into that at the end of the session. But so earth is the body. And earth is obviously earth. The air is associated with mind, is associated with the mental, the intellect, but we'll use the keyword mind. And we associate it with the stars or even the sky. And because we use real organic terms of nature in our practice, because it is about how sacred the earth is. And then, of course, fire, we associate with the sun. It's also associated with will or energy, and I do use those terms interchangeably for fire. And then, of course, the moon for water. Now, in the personal part of that is our heart, our emotions, our feelings. And those are all very traditional correspondences that you will find anywhere on the internet that you could look up the elemental correspondences in magic. So again, earth body, air mind, fire will, and water heart, or earth earth, air the stars or the sky, fire the sun, and water the moon or the oceans or the seas. So very basic stuff there as far as elemental magic. So I'm going to come back to the pentagram. So here's where we're going to kind of dig in just a little bit. Um, you can study the traditional correspondences and get really grounded in those, and I do encourage that. But we approach it from the perspective that, let's say, on any day of the week, some days we're like just really kicked into logic gear, to reason and intellect and mental task that we've got. So maybe our air balance that day, the air is kind of like over here at 70%. Maybe the rest of them are filling out that other 30%. But we're never without earth, air, water, or fire. There's always some presence there. And sometimes we have to awaken it to help balance out other things in our life. So that's the main goal of how we work with the elementals. So, for instance, if you're familiar with ceremonial magic, and this is even in British traditional Wicca, you'll learn, a lot of people learn the lesser banishing ritual of pentagram. Well, as I've stated, we don't banish because we believe that integration is more important than mastery, and that we are a whole, and we want to treat the elementals, even though they work as four elemental energies, they are still part of a whole, that unity, underlying duality that we covered with the tenets of holistic magic. So, for instance, what I will do, let's say I want to do a ritual in the morning and I want to do a pentagram ritual. So, the way we approach that, as a witch, I start in the north. If you're a ceremonial magician, you may start in the east. It doesn't really matter. But I might go draw my pentagram. Help, I usually do earth to the sun, which is perfect for the way we do our magic grades in the Temple of Ma'at. I will do my pentagram and then just something very simple like I honor the spirits of earth, or I honor my body if I'm wanting to kind of focus on the personal side of my life that day. And then I might move over to the east and say, and do the pentagram and say, I honor the spirits of air, or I honor the spirits of the stars. Same thing with fire. I honor the spirit of the sun, or I honor the spirit, or I honor my will. Then, to the water, I honor the spirits of the moon, or the spirit of the seas, or I honor my heart. So there's basically just taking those correspondences. And it's so simple because you are just reiterating what is already inside you. So that's a very simple way to do a pentagram ritual every day. And we're going to talk a little bit about that collective personal dynamic in just a minute. But I wanted to kind of get into the crux of, all right, so you can do that for a ritual, but how can we use the pentagram to actually do spiritual work? And this is very high level, very surface. I'm not digging in too deeply, but consider, for instance, let's say I am having one of those days where I'm just, dry. I'm just spending too much in my head, too intellectual, want everything to make intellectual sense, and it's kind of making me sterile and dry. Well, one of the ways that you can balance that is to invoke water. Water to add a little bit of more emotion. Let's say you're being too reasonable. Let's say, oh, welcome to my neighborhood. Let's say you're being too reasonable. You need to inject a little more emotion into something. You can do a ritual as simple as going to the Western Quarter, which is associated with water, doing an invoking pentagram, and you can even do the one that invokes water. We won't go into any detail on that. You can look that up. But you can go to that and just pray for more feeling and more heart, more emotion, to create a little bit more symmetry in your personal being, or even in how you are interacting with the world. So let's give another example. Let's say you're too emotional. Let's say you've just been wailing like a banshee all day, and and so just figure out, what's going to settle me. I need to do something. Go to the north and ask to be grounded. Hold some dirt in your hand, light a brown candle in the north, and invoke the element of earth to ground you and to stabilize you. You know, let's say you are running over everybody like a bull in a china shop. Let's say you got that fire energy going. You could ground it. You could go to the north and ground it. You could go to the west and um, and cool it down. Let's say, going back to the water example, let's say you're too emotional and you need to inject some logic. Go light a blue candle in the east and just say a prayer. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. But the whole idea is that when these are functioning, and it's not always like, this is, 20, 20, 20, 20, 20 to give you 100. We are always interacting and intermingling with the energies and the environment around us. So it's about being adaptable. It's about being flexible. So if you do need to have a little more feeling in what you're doing, if you do need to inject a little bit of emotion, take some time. Just even face west and say a prayer for a little compassion or a little empathy or a little flow, whatever you need. So it's really about learning how to use the pentagram as a spiritual tool, and it's so quick. You can literally just face the direction. Um, if you're one of those people that has an altar, I love table altars. I do table spells where if you've got your hallows, maybe your cup of your chalice for water, your red candle for fire, your incense for air, and your bowl of salt for earth. If you have them arranged, you can literally just go spend some time with your hallow. Because at the end of the day, this is all feeding into the spiritual framework that we've built up in our own personal paradigm and our own personal philosophies. So it's going to connect even if you are not intellectually articulating it or thinking about it in your brain. When you've done the practice for a very long time, when I face west, it's water. I don't really even have to think that hard about it. It's water, it's emotions. And if you do use deities, you can pray to that deity. If you have a water deity like Oshun, if you're in an African religion, or um, Happy, he's the god of the Nile. Or Osiris is the god of the West. So you can use whatever energies, whatever touchstones that you need. But consider that every single day, your body, your mind, your heart, and your energy are all working together. And the idea is to have a healthy whole. So there may be days because of the work that lies ahead of me that I need to have more fire. I need to have more determination. I need to have more courage. That's okay if it's 50% fire that day and the rest are kind of filling it up, because that's what I need for that day. So it's about being fluid. It's about being flexible. It's about understanding who you are and how you relate to each part of your elemental natures. Because what we carry within, we see without. I'm not going to dig into this today, but for instance, when I'm working with elemental magic, I might invoke the gnomes at the north when I need some strength or I need some solid grounding. I might invoke the sylphs in the east when I need some creative inspiration and some intellectual, fire. And you obviously can call them more than one element at a time, but that too is a class for another day. So the whole goal here is to understand that we embody all four of these elemental natures. So how you work with them and how you perceive them and how you honor them are just ways to honor yourself and to expand your own perceptions. And it also creates a greater connection with the world around you. If you're lucky like me and you live in a beautiful part of the world, I live in East Tennessee. We have 4 seasons. It is so beautiful to watch these seasons change. And it's great for our coven too, because we get to celebrate the seasons. The way we actually focus on these elementals throughout the course of the year, the wheel of the year, is we take an element at each of the 4 quarters, basically. So, for instance, right now at the autumn equinox, we are in a water season, and we will stay in that water season till we get to the winter solstice, which is where we will begin to honor Earth again. And then air will start at the spring equinox. And then fire will start at the summer solstice. And then water again at the autumn equinox. And they just become seasons for us so that we each, throughout the course of the year, can focus on each of these elements and what they mean and all their correspondences. For instance, the water season. So we've got water is associated with autumn, and it's associated with the west, and it's associated with the evening and sunset. All those types of correspondences we get to watch play out because we do live in such a beautiful part of the world. So that gives you an idea. So just to reiterate, you can do an easy pentagram ritual every day where you just draw the pentagram in the quarter and then invoke that elemental energy. If you want to invoke Gob at the north, that's fine. If you want to invoke Odin at the north, that's fine. But just something that represents that earth elemental energy for you, the soil, the richness of the soil, the darkness, the cold and the dry alchemically. And then move around. Like I said, if you start in the east, that's great. That's the time of the sunrise, the light breaking through. You can honor the spirits of your mind. You can honor your intellect. You can honor the stars. You can honor the stellar energies all around us. So that's a great way to do an easy pentagram ritual every day. And to kind of close out and to kind of wrap this up, I want to really combine this idea that we're talking about with pentagram magic and how we do the pentagram with also the idea of good versus evil. So, with the caveat being that left is not evil and right good. They're both just directions. You can go to the left, you can go to the right. So we're not really in the mode of what you would can traditionally consider like left-hand path. But we do use the upside down or the reverse pentagram as well. So this is going to be just really simple, very high level. So if you have, like I was raised Christian, I was raised Southern Baptist. So for the longest time, that was a bad, evil symbol. But when you really start deconstructing and understand that this is just a symbol, so it's as sacred or as evil as I choose to make it. So we do use the upright pentagram for a totally different reason. It's all a whole. So if this is upright and this is reversed, it's still a symbol. Okay. So when we do our morning ritual, ideally, because I'm going to expand just a little bit on that. But when we do our morning ritual, we'll use the reversed pentagram. Okay, and you still have your elemental associations. I've still got earth over here, and water over here, and fire over here, and air over here. But it's pointing down to the earth, and we are earth grade. We are of earth. So what this becomes is our personal pentagram. So when we work with the personal pentagram, we are working with those elements, the more personal elements, the body, the mind, the energy, and the heart. So I might go and do the reverse one because it's pointing towards the earth, and the earth is sacred. I can do that pentagram there in the north and honor my body. Okay, but as I generally teach, you start in the mornings with the collective. And why would we start with the collective? Well, the collective, everybody, and here's our collective terms again, just to review: the earth, the stars, the sun, and the moon, or the oceans. So we call this the collective pentagram. And why do we call it the collective pentagram? Because everyone experiences the sun. All humans experience the sun. All humans experience the stars. All humans experience the moon. All humans experience the earth. So we call this our collective pentagram. So we will actually do this in the mornings first thing, especially if you're getting ready to go out to work. Let's say you're getting ready to go out, you're getting ready to go out and be in the world where you're with other humans and you're interacting with the environment around you. So we'll do that elemental collective pentagram in the mornings to integrate ourselves more fully into our environment with how we're going to interact with the forces of earth, air, and water, and fire in the world around us. You may get that person at work that's just a fireball, and you might need to calm them down with a little bit of your water energy. So it's invoking those types of energies in the morning. And then in the evenings, you can choose to do what we call the personal pentagram, where you're bringing it back down to earth. You're kind of like bringing it back into the soil and grounding and kind of closing down for the evening and honoring your body because it's probably been through a lot today, and honoring your mind because it's been busy all day, and honoring your energy and honoring your feelings and your heart. So, like I said, holistic magic, that good and evil binary is so unhealthy, and it has damaged so many things in our personal paradigms, and because of the cultural inculcation of Christianity in our everyday life. So, this is not an evil symbol for us. This is simply a reverse pentagram that represents the powers of the earth because it's pointing down the earth, and the earth is sacred. And this is pointing up to the stars or the sun because that is our collective cosmic consciousness. The sun represents the cosmic consciousness. So it's a lot to wrap up into what's just barely over a half an hour now. But if you ever have any questions, you are free to contact me. Like I said, I'm on Instagram, although I'm not on there as much because of the algorithms. But I am on Blue Sky as RoseCrow. I am on TikTok. Temple of Ma'at also on Facebook, and of course it's here on YouTube, and I would appreciate any subscriptions. But just something to consider in your practice. I'll go into further detail in a future class, especially on the good-evil dynamic, because we do have to deconstruct left and right path. We do have to deconstruct weak. Women is weak and men is strong. Or just, what we've been culturally told is how a woman acts or how a man acts. Like, it's unfeminine for a woman to be aggressive. And I'm like, what? You ever seen a mama protecting her kid? Or a woman protecting her kitty cat? Because mine's right outside the door right now, wanting in. But so I'm saying is like there's all these things that we have to deconstruct and take a look at it. And when it gets down to good and evil, I do encourage you to think, is this natural or is this unnatural? We could go all day about sexuality and how the church represses feminine sexuality especially. But in the process of sublimating the feminine face of God, it damages all humans. It damages women as much as it damages men. It damages those who identify as women as much as those who identify as men, because we have to have that balance. We are both essence and presence. We are both the animated and the embodiment. And so, again, upcoming soon, we'll have a class on nomenclature that's more inclusive in your groups. We focus on that pretty heavily because this group will always be LGBTQIA friendly. It will always be inclusive. I'll make one more note about Wild Women, Wise Women, and Witches, which is another YouTube page. It's also a private group on Facebook, but that's open to all women, inclusively, but exclusively women. So if you identify as a woman, you are more than free to join that group. We work on just positive affirmations, empowerment. I post a lot of affirmations that help us redefine ourselves. We have folks on there that are, into Lilith and Hecate, and we have those that are just kind of, those sweet spirits, those gentle spirits, those gentle women that, kind of help provide a balance for some of us that are a little more wild. So check that out as well. Anyway, I'm RoseCrow. You can find me on Blue Sky. I really don't know who joined. I'm just tickled that somebody showed up. That's pretty freaking cool. Like I said, you can find me on Blue Sky. And if you ever have any questions, just hit me up. I do encourage you to just think about these things, even if you don't run off, tomorrow and do a collective pentagram where you honor the spirits of the earth and the stars and the sun and the moon. However you practice, always remember that your elemental natures, your elemental balance and symmetry is so important, because until we have that vessel in a healthy state, it's going to be much harder to achieve a higher state of consciousness, the collective consciousness, which is, represented by the sun, and which is what we're working towards, where when you get to that collective consciousness, you do start working with more psychic energies. And because we have those motifs in myths, and these are really powerful that we all have access to them, and they all mean something to us at a psychic level. So when we create an elemental balance and harmony, we are creating a strong vessel to continue to grow. Because a tree that has weak roots or has dying or decaying roots is not going to grow. So it always starts here. So I encourage you to explore, at least explore the elementals and get to and connect with them. Be out in nature as much as you can, but you can do it at home too. You know, you can have your hallows on your desk when you take a shower. That's fire and water. You know, when you watch the north winds blow in, like we've been doing here in East Tennessee, you're connecting with air. And I do encourage you to explore the correspondences. Of course, they're ad infinitum, but just remember at the core, we're talking about natural earth energies that we all embody. So we don't banish, we integrate. And the more you integrate them and you allow them to function in a harmonious state, kind of picking you up in the emotions when you're feeling a little too dry, or grounding you when you're a little too fired up, those things, the more you explore them and the more you work with them, they become part of your spiritual framework and create a beautiful, healthy, natural, organic, holistic vessel. And of course, leads to a path of holistic magic as well. When you honor all the elementals, there's nothing more holistic than honoring all the elementals, especially if you're a witch. So with that, I'm going to close out. I appreciate everybody who joined. I hope if you joined late that you will go back and check it from the beginning. But again, you know, the pentagram can be used for spiritual integration of those elemental natures, and we all need it to become healthy and whole and become harmonious and vital vessels of divine energy, so that we can continue to grow and continue to ascend with our roots firmly grounded on this planet on which we stand. So good night, everybody. Look for a class soon. I'm going to do a class soon where I dig in a little bit deeper to working with the pentagram, with demonstrations and that kind of thing. And it'll probably be a Zoom class. So love to all. Be kind to one another. And hopefully we'll see you soon. And thanks for joining me. I really, really appreciate it.